Hello, I am Ajahn Roy Morian and I am an academic editor with the NU Graduate School. Over the last 4 years, I've edited over 400 pieces of English writing, journal articles, theses and dissertation chapters, PR notices, academic documents and many others. Again and again, the same basic grammar errors are made. I will now demonstrate editing a document that has been given to me to be corrected. The first thing I want to show you is how to set some features of Word to assist you while you are writing. This is done by selecting the File menu option, the Options selection, and the Proofing selection. I want to change this to make sure that I do not ignore words in uppercase, so I have clicked on that. I'm quite happy to check spelling as you type, make grammar errors, to mark grammar errors as you type, and so on. So, if you're happy with your options, OK, and we return back to the document. By setting the spell checking on automatic as you type, you see that certain words are underlined in red, and that says Word does not recognise them as being correct. Obviously, in this case, Word doesn't know what Pitch Barramundi Pitching-Lock Hospital is, so it said, I don't know about that. Before we get underway, and this is something that you should do before you even submit your paper for editing, is to do a spell check and a grammar check. And this is done in Word by pressing F7. And the first thing that it tells us is that there's something wrong with that. Now, inspection shows us that it's objecting to the space before the colon. Now, this is the first rule of writing. Every full stop, comma, colon, semicolon, you do not have a space before the punctuation mark, but you always have one space after the punctuation mark. That is a rule that applies to every document, all the text in the document. So I'm going to change that, and you see that Word has removed the unnecessary space. Now it arrives at Pitch Barramundi Pitching-Lock Hospital. Let's ignore that, and we will ignore all occurrences of it. Word doesn't know what Pitching-Lock is, but we'll ignore that for the moment. Angsi Paisal, I believe, is an author. We'll ignore that, assuming that the name is spelled correctly. And here we have our first grammar problem. The program were. We're talking about one program. So we don't say were, we say was. So I'll change that. Again, we have an author. We'll ignore that. Hyper-alertness. Now, Word is telling us that hyper-alertness should be two words, hyper space alertness. My first impression of this is perhaps it should actually have a hyphen in it. But the point to be made is whether it's one word, hyper-alertness, or whether it's hyper-hyphen alertness or hyper-space alertness, really depends on, is it a word that is usually pronounced and spelled like that in your particular profession? If everybody in the medical profession uses this word, hyper-alertness, as one word, fine, continue to use it. And now we will resume our spell check with Microsoft Word. We'll ignore that. The total observed items score was R. In this particular case, we're talking about a particular single score, the total. Okay? But that is the subject of the sentence, followed by the verb to be and the verb to be. Why? What is necessary here is just to say the total observed item score was. And I'm not going to accept what Word says, I'm just going to change that. The total observed items score was, because we are talking about the single total, okay? And so I'll resume, finished checking, yes, we will continue. The total elicited items score R, we have exactly the same thing, but here is a little lesson in using the correct verb tense. The total elicited item score was something that was calculated in the past. So we refer to it as being in the past. So was. And because again we're talking about one noun, one total, we use was for singular noun. Let's resume. The total, and it was converted. The total raw score R, well, one total raw score. R applies to plural nouns, but in any case, I want that to be in the past because that calculation was done in the past when you were doing your research. And that's an important point. When you are discussing your research and the results of your research as you are reporting them, that was done in the past, so you need the past tense of the verbs. And it was converted. Okay, let's just resume. The total raw score. It's still getting upset about that. Because one raw score in the past was, and it was converted to, let's resume. Okay. Word has helped us quite a bit with some spelling and with some grammar problems. Okay. Let's return to the start of this particular paper. Now, first of all, the first thing I want to mention is about the name of the hospital in which the research was carried out. I've already changed the name to my fictitious hospital name, Pechparawandi Pitchinarok Hospital. But the point is, my concern is first, is about privacy in the research. My view is that the particular hospital or school or institution should not be included in the text. Perhaps you can recognise their participation in the acknowledgement section at the end of the paper, but only with their approval. Now, I stress that this is my point of view, and you would have to make sure that your supervisor agrees with me. Secondly, I would only refer to specific institutions by name or the specific locations, such as Pitchinarok Province, if your research is particularly relevant to that place and perhaps would not be relevant elsewhere. In any case, because you intend to publish in an international journal, any reader outside Thailand would probably need to use Google Maps to find out where Pitchinarok Province is. Making the important point that your research was in Thailand might be seen as meaning that the research is not relevant to anywhere else in the world except Thailand. So be careful to ensure that it is understood that your research is not restricted in this way. Okay, the particular text. Given what I just said about the name of the hospital, I would rewrite this sentence to say, the study was carried out at a prominent hospital. A little bit confused here. The study was carried out at a prominent hospital. And ethical approval was obtained. Now, you obtained from, okay, you obtained by the author of, the approval was obtained by the author, but obtained from the Ethical Review Committee. Now, Ethical Review Committee is the name of a part of the organisation. It is what we call a proper noun, so that should always have uppercase capitalisation of the words in the name. Now that I have already mentioned the prominent hospital, I would just say of the hospital. So there it is. You have immediately established where the study was carried out, and you have immediately established that ethical approval was obtained. As few words as possible for as much information as possible. Moving on, this cross-sectional design was conducted between, okay. Now here again we have the name of a particular unit. This time it does have capitalisation already, but because it is a noun phrase, it is a proper noun, and it is the only early intervention unit in the hospital, you must say the early intervention unit. This is the biggest mistake that people make when they're writing papers: incorrect use of articles, and the. So this is the early intervention unit of the hospital. Now, nobody can say what hospital, because you have clearly established up here it is a prominent hospital, and that's where the study was carried out. I would remove Pitchinlock province of Thailand. Sample selection was carried out by convenience sampling. Participants were a parent or caregiver of 14 preterm infants. That can be read to mean that you're one parent with 14 preterm infants. I would change that to participants were parents or caregivers of 14 preterm infants, aged between 34 weeks, post-conceptual age. I'd have to think, does post-conceptual need a hyphen? Probably not, but I would check the dictionary to make sure. Post-conceptual age and 4 months by corrected age, who have already been discharged. They did not do the discharging. It was the infants who had already been discharged from the hospital. subjects were divided into. Now, this is the first time this particular concept of this intervention group has been introduced, and you must have an article. So if the subjects were divided into an intervention group, n equals 10, and a control group, n equals 4. Now, not only you can, but you should refer to these groups as the intervention group was received. No, the intervention group received. Straightforward subject verb structure. The intervention group received a 14-day massage program which included stimulating awareness of body's midline, of the body midline of the infant by the parent or caretaker. Thought. Thought. I think what is meant here is throughout, meaning for the whole of the program, the whole of the study, which included stimulating awareness of the body midline of the infant by the parent or caretaker. Now here we're talking about each infant, and each infant has a parent or caretaker. The control group, again, who received the standard care? It was the control group. So the control group received standard care, past tense of the verb to receive, without any massage and general touches. Now, that is ambiguous. The control group received standard care without any massage and general touches from parents were allowed. I would say but general touches from the parent or caregiver were allowed. Children with, now here is a list: unstable medical status, structural and congenital abnormalities, obvious musculoskeletal and neurological problems. I prefer the style where even before the last and we put a comma. Let's change this around just a little bit. We'll cut that out here and we'll put it here. We'll cut this out and put it as the last. Now what we have now is a list containing unstable medical status, neurological problems, obviously obvious musculoskeletal abnormalities. Now, that one is a single point, unstable medical status, neurological problems, obvious musculoskeletal abnormalities, but the last item in the list is compound, structural and congenital abnormalities. Now, if I put a comma here, that indicates that what follows the and is the last item in the list, even though it itself contains an and. So that last comma there is quite important to ensure that you know what the last item is. If it's a one item, fine. If it's an and, structural and congenital, that comma helps for understanding. My very last point that I want to make